the disaster that just happened at the White House is another indication of what trouble we're in, and it all has to do with Donald Trump's malignant narcissism. Narcissists see things as good or bad. There's no nuance for them. You are either good or you are bad, and you cannot be both. They cannot hold that kind of cognitive dissonance of something both being good and bad. And so the reality of politics has made Donald Trump see the United States as a persecutory object to be destroyed because of his hatred of Joe Biden, because of his hatred of Democrats. He actually hates America because America is made up of Republicans and Democrats. And so the government, the media, all of these institutions that are bending to Donald Trump are bending to the whims of his narcissism to soothe his somatic quest for supply, be it positive supply when they're worshiping him or sadistic supply when he's punishing his enemies, like when he said January 6th was a day of love. To him, watching all of those people commit acts of violence in his name, storm the Capitol in his name, destroy their lives in his name were acts of love. He interpreted that as love. He was telling the truth. That to watch them commit acts of violence to tear down the constitutional institutions of a peaceful transfer of power was to show Donald Trump love. And he has successfully triangulated his cult from what's good for America, where they now cheer on only what is good for Donald Trump. And now the government only kind of snaps to what is good for Donald Trump. And pathologically, he cannot do anything but act in ways that are going to destroy this country because he doesn't act according to his cognitive thoughts. He acts according to his somatic state and to soothe himself. And the only way to soothe himself after the United States government tried to hold him accountable for an insurrection and various other things, after somebody attempted his life, after he lost an election in 2020, the only way for him to soothe himself is to destroy those things, which is to say, destroy the United States. And that's what he's doing. I mean, you don't really listen to what narcissists say. You just watch what they do. And everything him and his boyfriend Musk are doing is the dismantling of the American empire, of America, and not in a good way. I mean, people want to see the empire destroyed, sure, but this is sometimes like the status quo is better than what it's going to be replaced with. And this is one of those times where, if this is allowed to continue and keep going the way it's going, people are going to be begging for late stage capitalism. These people are funny, so we should keep funding a proxy war. Why not? I mean, American foreign policy, American, like, actual economic policy has always been about proxy wars. Look into the Shockley Doctrine. The sociopaths that emerged post World War II that were running our country wanted to find a way to kind of sustain the exponential growth of the war years. But there's a funny little thing that happens. War is the most profitable and growth-oriented endeavor that man has ever created. And so in order to sustain that growth, they needed to create a foreign policy of forever war. And so they invented this little thing called the Cold War, where they claimed because we had nukes and they had nukes, we couldn't fight each other directly because of mutually assured destruction. And so what the Cold War was a weapon-selling bonanza. By controlling the nukes and who had them, and then just doling out the second tier of weapons to everybody, selling them, right? So you guys think we're like funding a proxy war? You think that's what we're doing? We're moving public dollars into the American private sector by giving money to American defense contractors for their products and then sending American products to Ukraine. And so let's stop all of the corporate welfare to the military industrial complex. That'd be great. Let's have that conversation. But for Republicans to kind of play this kind of little game where you guys, I don't even know what you are, but they're doing this, where like somehow now like Republicans are the anti-war candidates, don't make me laugh. That's only in Donald Trump's narcissistic inverted reality. There's no stopping of the war machine. There's no stopping as the American government's true function, which is to say a weapons dealer enriching the military industrial complex. And so, like, you're just brainwashed by Russian propaganda or a Russian bot. I mean, it's funny to me, like, how Republicans have gone from, like, celebrating Ronald Reagan's government spending and proxy war strategy of bleeding the USSR dry. The number one thing you guys love Reagan for was destroying the Soviet Union. He did that through government spending and proxy wars. So for you guys to turn around and try to pretend that you're not the fucking like warmongers of all time, like the global leaders in historical warmongering, that's the Republican Party. You guys have never met a war you didn't like because it makes so much money and it gets you to spread democracy. And so it has nothing to do with Democrats. They're warmongers too. But this idea that like what he's doing is somehow good for the country and that it's about like oh, wouldn't it be better to spend some of that money here? That's what you guys are saying. No, you just call that socialism. So what will happen is rich people will just get tax breaks. All of what you guys are arguing about is so that rich people cannot pay their taxes. But it's just funny. Like, hey, let's keep funding a proxy war. Well, it's just funny. You guys are so delusional. Like you create these kind of false equivalencies and these readings of like what's happening that are so detached from reality that at this point it's just funny. Like you guys need to get your heads examined. Like stop talking politics and seek some therapy. What happened in the White House yesterday was one for the history books. I mean, we witnessed the kind of death of 100 years of American foreign policy, of our centering of our kind of special relationship with Europe against the so-called Iron Curtain and kind of Russian aggression in the last couple decades. But to me, it was like this perfect example of narcissistic abuse, what happened between Zelensky and Trump on a very personal level, on a just human-to-human level, where, you know, the gist of narcissistic abuse is you actually have to understand the context in which the kind of conversations are occurring. And so the context here is that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine and launched kind of the bloodiest war on European soil since World War II, and a war of aggression, right? And so Trump, like, saying Zelensky doesn't want peace and kind of talking about Zelensky's, like, hatred for Vladimir Putin and then demanding, like, he thank him is classic gaslighting and narcissistic abuse, right? Because it's Darvoing. It's talking about him not wanting peace when what he doesn't want is surrender. And so what narcissistic abuse does is backs us into a corner by mischaracterizing our position and then making us kind of scramble to defend a position we don't have. And then we end up kind of like in a paralyzed state or kind of looking frantic and arguing about things, right? Where like there was no way for Zelensky to emerge from those conversations without either just like completely kissing the ring or fighting. And that's the gist of narcissistic abuse, where you're not actually arguing the issue at hand. You're arguing reality and your like natural human right to frame your own reality, to have your own interpretation of that reality, right? There is no shared reality. They set the premise. You don't want peace. And this is the gist of why narcissists win in kind of arbitrary situations, because then you have to spend all this time saying, well, wait a minute, I don't want peace. I didn't want my fucking country getting invaded, right? I didn't want this war at all. It's not about peace. It's about get these fucking Russians the fuck out of my country. But that's not what Trump is offering. He's saying peace. What he means is you're not ready to surrender, right? And so that was fucking crazy. I mean, what people are experiencing today is grief. Everybody's in grief. You see all these videos of people crying, of all these different emotional responses. What they don't understand is something died there, and it was a lot of people's conception of America, right? Perhaps they weren't aware of kind of the reality of American foreign policy and the kind of reality of America, like never really doing anything except if it's in our best interest. But yesterday was just a realignment. It was doing away with the old world and ushering in this new one where we're part of the axis of evil now. And people are feeling that on a visceral level, even if they're not quite comprehending what that means. I can't stand Tom Nichols. Like I used to get in it with him on like Twitter or somewhere because he didn't want to call all of this stuff fascism. He was super late to the party on that one, but it was premeditated, planned ambush. Donald Trump, like Vladimir Putin has Trump, whether they want to admit that or not. Like Trump is Putin's like lapdog, and so I was saying the whole time, like Trump's gonna hand Ukraine to Russia. That was the most obvious thing this side of Trump handing Gaza to Netanyahu, right? And so this is the pretext for that. This was the political theater that will allow Trump to sell to his base the complete selling out of Ukraine to Russia. Because now look at Zelensky, this ungrateful little man who's not even wearing a suit, who won't kiss the ring. Why would we help him? Right? I mean, he's saying shit like, well, we put Putin through the Russia hoax. Like, he's literally siding with Putin over America again. That's like Trump loves two things: putting his name on buildings and siding with Putin over America. And so, of course, that was planned. It's pretextual. Everything they do is pretextual. They will give us the theater needed to sell to their base whatever the fuck they want to do. And then their base just goes out there and lies about it. I mean, look at this Doge stuff and the Epstein thing. What's the common denominator between the Doge and the Epstein stuff? They sold like publicly available information to their cult as like them like releasing something. The Doge stuff was all accessible on government websites. None of it was hidden. And the stuff they released with Epstein was just like these call logs that they redacted, that are actually on the internet in unredacted form. They literally gave less information. They redacted information that's actually available on the internet and presented that as like the Epstein files. All of this is just theater, right? They're giving them the theater so that they can believe the lies. Like, they're gaslighting themselves. It's all pretextual. It's all creating this alternate universe. And we're just like nothing to them. Like, this is all them having conversations with themselves, gaslighting themselves, right? We're just watching like in horror, but we really don't even matter at this point. Like, we're only going to be targets of their eventual violence, all of us, because that's exactly where it's going to lead. And so, yeah, totally. There are no comebacks to narcissists. They respond to ridicule or force. And so Zelensky doesn't have any leverage. So there was nothing he could say to kind of prevent that public flogging. That was a designed theatrical ambush, executed to give the pretext for the abandonment of Ukraine and Zelensky to Russia, which was a certainty. Anybody who had half a brain understood that if Donald Trump became president, he'd be handing Ukraine to Russia. And so that public meeting was designed to humiliate and embarrass Zelensky and frame him as an ungrateful, petulant child, so that the MAGA base will eat it up and that Donald Trump can do what he's planned to do all along, which is do Vladimir Putin's bidding and surrender. When he's talking to Zelensky about saying you're not ready for peace, he's saying you're not ready for surrender, right? There was nothing Zelensky could have said. There's nothing in those situations. Like, it's purely power and leverage at that point. It's purely like power. The narcissist, everything is transactional. And since Zelensky needs American weapons in the transaction, and Donald Trump sees no actual value in helping Ukraine, it's a transaction. He has no leverage. So there was absolutely nothing Zelensky could do. This is the crux of narcissistic abuse. When you need something from them, they'll treat you any way they want. And there's no amount of kind of appealing to reason or kindness or anything. They're living in an alternate universe. And in Trump's alternate universe, Putin is right and Zelensky is wrong. And Zelensky needs to kiss the ring of both Trump and Putin, and he's never going to do that. And so there's never been a scenario where Trump was going to do anything but abandon Ukraine. And again, this was just a manufactured political theater to provide the pretext for him doing that, because now all the MAGA media, all the MAGA kind of cult members will be parroting the talking points that he's ungrateful, that he never said thank you, that he argued with, he had the audacity to argue with fearless leader. And so there's nothing you can say. Narcissists respond to ridicule and force. And ridicule wasn't going to get him anywhere in that hostile territory, and he certainly couldn't deploy force. And so at that point, all he could do was sit there like he did in a daze as like the narcissist just attacks from all angles, that like he becomes the persecutory object where anything he says gets attacked, where there's literally nothing he can say to soothe Trump, because Trump in that position is soothed by lording his power over Zelensky. That it's about the cruelty, it's about the power, it's about the punishment, it's about the public display of hierarchy. And so anything he says, anything Zelensky says in that scenario will be met with a show of force and a show showing him who's boss and who has the leverage. That's the reality of negotiating with a narcissist. If you don't have any leverage, you're going to fucking lose and be humiliated.